Hello everyone, I'm Snir Yair. I'm here with Jewish Uncensored, and today we're going to be looking at a video by Douglas Murray. He was at a conference against anti-Semitism in Europe. We'll just analyze this and see what we can pick out from it.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'll be brief. I've spent most of the months since the 7th of October in Israel and Gaza, and have seen as much of the conflict as I think it's possible for non-combatant to see. I went to all of the massacre sites when they were still fresh. Have spent a lot of time with the survivors, the families of the hostages. I've been in the morgues of Tel Aviv where they're still trying to identify the dead. One young man's body was only identified yesterday. And think what it takes, what you have to do to a man to make his body unidentifiable for 8 months.
Yeah, 2 points. First, I think it's very genuine and very remarkable that we have a reporter like this actually going out of his way to the front lines and actually going behind the scenes to see people who are directly impacted. I think that's an aspect of reporting that's very much missing today. It's very impartial and removed from everything that's actually going on the ground. It's just they try to get you to the headlines and that's it. So they sort of ignore the human aspect behind that. And I really like that about Douglas Murray. He actually goes to the people's houses and he actually interviews people and sees firsthand the humanity that's behind all this. Second point is, this, anyone who's watched any of the Holocaust movies and learned anything about history, it reminds you, besides the Holocaust, also the rape of Nanking, and there was a infamous military unit in Japan that did a lot of human testing and research on people, and was just brutal. I think it was Unit 39 or 29, if I'm correct. But to disfigure a human being out of pure hatred, that's just monstrous.
One of the things that struck me most after the 7th of October was I was at one of the reunions of the Nova Party. And these are all young people who'd seen their friends raped and murdered in front of them. One young man, a survivor, showed me footage from his phone, and it included footage of a young friend of his who didn't make it into his car and was lynched by a mob immediately afterwards. This young man, this survivor, said to me, "What would you do if this happened in your country?" And I thought, no, I didn't say, but it has. It has happened in my society, in my Europe, in my West. The scale may be different, but the terrorists are the same. It happened here in Paris at the Bataclan. It happened in Manchester, where 22 young girls were blown up for the crime of going to a pop concert. It happened at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. The scale was different, but the perpetrators are all the same. They're always the same people who, whether in Toulouse or Port de Vincennes, Copenhagen or Mumbai, can never restrain themselves from targeting the Jews. Yet the sympathy of so many people.
And since this video by Douglas Murray was recorded in July, just yesterday, on December 21st, we had the whole attack in Germany where an individual of a Middle Eastern background who prescribed to the Islamic faith ran over about 200 people on a Christmas party in Germany, as well as we had a Jewish rabbi in, I believe, Dubai or UAE who was murdered and kidnapped and murdered and left his body left on the side of the road for the authorities to find.
People here in Europe since the 7th has not been on the side of the victims, but on the side of the perpetrators. Too many people mistake the victim for the oppressor, the underdog for the overdog, and those who fight terrorism with those who dream of it and bring up their children to love it from the cradle. Consider this. In every European capital, as well as in America, photographs of the Israeli hostages still in captivity by Hamas have been put up. and in every city outside of Israel, they have been torn down. Think about that for a moment. If someone in London or Paris loses their dog, they will put up a poster asking people to help find them. And if even one person in our society went around tearing down such a poster, we would ask what had happened in our society.
Yeah, and definitely on that note, it's not a single incident that happens in one city or another where there might be a large population of those who support, I guess, the Palestinian side, but this has been something that's been happening across all cities. Here in where I live in Toronto, we've seen numerous videos of people just brazenly ripping out posters, and people ask them what they're doing, and they're like, "Oh, I'm supporting Palestine," and just no care for human life whatsoever. They think they're in the right, and they're gonna, go with that till the end, despite how many people they're hurting on the way. This is a global phenomenon.
We would ask why we were producing people so pathological. We would want to find the person and punish them. Yet when the missing are Jewish children, or Jewish women, or Jewish men, because there's no crime in being a man either, these posters are torn down. One of the relatives of the Bibas children held in captivity told me recently that he saw posters of his one-year-old relative torn down in the center of Dublin. One other consideration. We have all for years heard the feminists issue a call on male sexual violence against women. Believe all women. But where was the solidarity? Where was the sympathy or even belief when the women were Jews?
Bravo. Bravo.
The belief evaporates.
And just another thing that's really surprises me about the human nature, because here in Canada, we get, anytime a child goes missing, we get an Amber Alert, and it's a national text to everyone's cell phone through their carriers, no matter which carrier you're on. You get an Amber Alert saying this child is missing. Often it's like a relative that's actually kidnapped the child. But I don't understand how people can't feel that. It doesn't matter, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, doesn't matter what religion, what culture the person's from. Deep down, you get this feeling that's, I wish I could stop this. I wish I could prevent these incidents from happening. And I just don't see how someone can be so heartless. That's okay. They're from a nation you dislike. These were children that were kidnapped. So I just don't get that lack of humanity that's there.
And I won't even go into the psychopathology and suicidalism of Queers for Palestine, who are a branch of Turkeys for Christmas. It was Hamas that started this war, yet much of the world has forgotten this. They've been fooled by Hamas propaganda into imagining that Israel is the aggressor. Having seen this war up close, I can tell you with 100% certainty that the war would be over tomorrow, not just if Hamas returned the Jewish hostages, but if the Palestinians in Gaza brought up their children not to hate but to love. Not to aspire to a cult of death, but to join Israel in a belief in life, not to believe in destroying a state, but to put their energies into building one.
I was actually speaking to an Azerbaijani Muslim, and he was doing security at a synagogue here in Toronto with me. And he was actually saying that the actual concept of jihad was really contorted and torn away from its original meaning. He was saying that all these different terrorist groups and countries who spread terror, that's, I guess, their main export, they use it to fund this radical ideology. And as he's saying, that this is what's being peddled in Gaza and the West Bank. We see this all the time, and with all these groups, ISIS, the Al-Qaeda, Al Jazeera too, I guess. But yeah, he was mentioning that the original idea of jihad was standing up for God and standing up for the word of God, and it was not meant as, so to speak, a holy war or killing other people for the name of your beliefs.
To hate but to love. Not to aspire to a cult of death, but to join Israel in a belief in life. Not to believe in destroying a state, but to put their energies into building one. Now, each era has its anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is famously a shape-shifting virus. Sometimes in the past, people hated Jews for their religion. Then you couldn't hate people for their religion, so people hated the Jews for their race. Then when you weren't allowed to hate people for their race anymore, you could hate the Jews for having and defending a state. This is the eternal challenge for the Jewish people. Gregor von Retzori, among others, showed us this. It's their challenge to be hated for being poor and for being rich. For being integrated and for not integrating. For being stateless, remember, rootless cosmopolitans, and also to be hated for having a state. But
that's funny. I see this all the time when I'm at these rallies. There's pro-Israel rallies, and then the pro-Palestinians come along, and there's a shouting match. But it's just funny. We see like the arguments from the other side are like, you aren't even real Jews, go back to Europe. But then on the other hand, they'll tell us, how dare you murder Palestinians in the name of God and in the name of your religion, and try to conquer the land in the name of your religion. So it's like such a weird, wishy-washy argument they have. And, they obviously ignore the fact that hundreds of thousands of Sephardic Jews who lived throughout the Arabs' lands were expelled from their homes and basically sent to Israel under threat of death. After the 67 war and during all the wars we had with the Arab nations around us.
But this is not only a challenge for the Jews, it's a challenge for all of us. As Vasily Grossman wrote in the dead center of his masterpiece, Life and Fate, and I quote, "Anti-Semitism is always a means rather than an end. It is a measure of the contradictions yet to be resolved. It is a mirror for the failings of individuals, social structures, and state systems. Tell me what you accuse the Jews of. I'll tell you what you're guilty of."
Putin recently basically blamed the Jews for ruining the Russian Orthodox Church, and then we have all these Nazi guys in Florida. I think they say that we're behind all the wokeism, and then it never ends. There's always something for them.
Bravo!
Today in Europe, this ancient hatred can come from the left and the right. We have to be alert to it and stand up to it whichever direction it comes from. Because among much else, everybody knows that anti-Semitism is an early warning sign. When a society starts to indulge in this lurid, paranoid fantasy, every other hatred comes next. We in Europe have a special debt to history and memory, and a special debt to the Jews. And not just because of what they suffered on our continent, but because of the richness of culture, learning, and faith that Jews have brought to our civilization.
Here's referring to the expulsions from basically almost every country in Europe: Britain, France, Spain, Germany. Besides the expulsions, also the pogroms in Ukraine, and obviously culminating in the Holocaust. But they've been, riddled. The whole continent has been riddled with different incidents against the Jewish people.
I say this at my most frank and deepest, at the deepest theological and philosophical levels. Our civilization could not exist without the Jewish people. But I want to end with one piece of good news. While much of Europe and the West, from the left, from the right, from the religious to the atheists, are indulging in this ancient hatred, Israel is showing another way. It's showing how Arab, Jew, Druze, Muslim, Christians, and others can live together and fight together. In recent months, I've met heroic Muslim doctors on the front line, heroic Druze fighters, among many others in Israel. As one brave young Druze fighter said to me recently, I think Hamas hate us even more than they hate the Jews.
Anyone who's basically stepped foot in Israel and travels the country from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and anywhere you go, you're going to see really a cosmopolitan city bustling with life, no different than if you're in Toronto or New York or anywhere else. You have to be blind, basically, to think it's just like Jews there and everyone else is kicked out. It'll be the opposite if you actually go into the Arab villages, because Jews aren't allowed to live there, or they're too scared to live there because they'll be constantly attacked and berated. But yeah, you're going to see a very big cosmopolitan area. Everyone's living together, despite the daily terror attacks we have from people who, Arab citizens or people who live in the West Bank, who are perpetrating these attacks and trying to kill Jews.
Israel knows what it is fighting for, and it knows that it's fighting not just for its survival, but the survival of all of us. When Israel is attacked, it stands up for itself. When Israelis are most barbarously assaulted, they don't fidget and wonder what to do, they fight. Because
the left's idea of defending yourself is basically calling the police while you're being attacked and hoping for the best. I don't think Israel agrees with that policy as much as the West sometimes wants us to follow that.
Because, and I'll finish on this, whether in Spain in the 15th century, Europe in the 20th century, or the Arab world for many centuries, the situation of the Jews has always been at its most perilous when Jews are prominent and weak. Since a lack of prominence does not seem possible to the Jewish people, thank God, that leaves only one option: prominent and strong. And it should be not only Israel that follows that model, but us too. Prominent, strong, united, and resolute.
Obviously, I love his material. Every time he presents, and I would love to see him if he comes to Toronto again. But I think there's one main message that we have to take here as, well, if you're a Jewish person watching this, or you're trying to be more educated about Jewish people and, on Jewish Uncensored. But there's a very important message that we have to take, is that no matter how many people attack us, we've always been here. That's God's promise to the Jewish people in the Torah. I will always protect you, and you may remain few in numbers, but there will always be a surviving group of Jewish people who are there to continue the legacy of our forefathers. We have to really be resolute and stand strong, like he was saying at the end, but at the same time, don't let all the opposition, and despite the fact that we're outnumbered around us, don't let that bring you down. We have to keep focusing on building ourselves and not bringing other people down. That's what's going to get us through this, what we say, exile. And that's really how we're going to grow and overcome everyone else. Because if everyone else is focused on bringing us down, they're not going to be able to build themselves up while we fight them. And they're going to be really easy to knock over. So stay strong. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next video.